Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for this educational webinar. Our moderator for today's panel discussion is Case Medlin, Regional Stewardship and Development Manager for InView. Case, thank you for bringing this important topic to our audience.
Thanks, Brian.
We are also going to try to save some time for the panelists' Q&A at the end of the hour, so if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please type them in the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll try to get those questions answered. With that being said, Case, I'll turn this over to you.
Thanks. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I think we've got an excellent panel that will be able to provide a lot of comments around Invora. And the title of this webinar is Invora plus RangeView, Transforming Rangeland with Guaranteed Long-Lasting Weasatch and Mesquite Control. For those that don't know, Invora is a relatively new product. I wouldn't call it a new product. We have been on the market for about 4 years with it, but it is being sold by InView Range and Pasture today. We're going to get around to hearing firsthand accounts of what basically our customers are seeing out of Invora. And this is one of those places where hopefully we can set the stage as far as what the problem is, what our customers have battled through over the last number of years, what tools they have used. Anything from mechanical to other chemical means, but then actually get into when they adopted Invora and some of the outcomes around Invora. So Invora was actually launched in 2020. So there again, I can't really call it a new product. The critical thing in my mind as where we're at today is we are now 4 years after launch. There's a lot of things that one can either spray on brush or mechanically manipulate brush and see an early response. Early response in terms of defoliation of the brush, in terms of weed control, in terms of grass release. A lot of things that you can see early on within the first few years. Now we're actually getting into that phase of Invora use where I start getting excited as far as being able to see those long-term benefits. And that's really where we're going to try to get to as we move into the program today. But first, I'd like to introduce some of the folks that you're going to be hearing from today. First, Darren Smith. He's the ranch manager at the Martin O'Connor Cattle Company down in Tivoli. Leland Foster, the owner of Wayland Foster Ranch in Sterling City. Ross McCrae, the owner and applicator of Ranch Aero Ag Aviation Services. Billy Campbell, a range and pasture specialist with InView, as well as Rob Brooks, a range and pasture specialist with InView. But first, before we get too far into this discussion, I'd like to hear from both Billy and Rob. And Rob, we'll start with you. Y'all cover pretty good sized territories out there. Tell us a little bit about the territory and a little bit about the problems that you see, particularly around the brush problems.
Absolutely. Thanks for passing it off, Case. So I cover the eastern portion of Texas, everything kind of east of I-35 and south of the Metroplex, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Historically, I mean, we do have some mixed brush. We have some mesquite and predominantly weasatch. But the country there's a little bit different. I mean, we have a lot of diversity from Gulf Coast plains through the middle part of the state where we have more post oak savanna, and then we get up, a little further north, and then also the trees in East Texas. Geographically and from a customer standpoint, we have a lot fewer big ranches. Darren's my representative here today, and they have a pretty big place down there on the Gulf Coast. But as you get further up into the central Texas portion, that's kind of the golden triangle of the state. And so a lot of the ranches end up being smaller. They have less options as far as being able to control things, as far as having aerial applicator availability. So a lot of those guys for years and years have shredded things and just exacerbated the problem and made them a lot worse. A lot of times they mow them simply to get them down small enough that they can go through and put a ground applicator over those things, because they're pretty limited as to how high that they could historically get over those things to about 4 or 5 feet. And as pernicious as weasatch is, those things, if we get some moisture like we had this last summer, I had guys that mowed it this spring, and they already had trees that were in that 4 to 5 foot tall range by this fall. That's not ideal. Having that little amount of growth compared to the amount of roots that are probably underneath the ground when those guys have been shredding those things for 20 years. So it makes for a real challenging situation in trying to get the kind of control that people want out of that. Most brush control treatments are not inexpensive to do, but typically we don't get into those situations overnight either. It's years and years of just trying to get by, and then folks finally get to a point where they feel like they have to do something to get those things back under control. And historically, the application methods and the products that we've been using, again, another big investment, but you put those things out there and they look good for a year or 2 years, and then within about 3 or 4 years, particularly on Weesatch, they're looking at making another application already. Invora has changed a lot of that. We're seeing a lot longer term control, just like our research had showed previously. But there's still a sweet spot. I mean, we like those trees to be 6 foot tall or better to make sure that we have a good leaf to stem ratio, or leaf to root ratio rather, to get enough herbicide into the plants to get good control with those things. Obviously, when we get to that stage, then we're looking more at aerial applications, whether by helicopter or planes, or even these days drones a lot are starting to step up, particularly in my part of the state, for these smaller acre ranchers. So,
Billy, what about you? What about you in your territory?
Okay, Case, I'm basically located, I live in Matador, Texas, and my territory comes from about Bowie, Texas, down to Junction, and then you follow I-10 going west to El Paso. And I cover half the western half, or excuse me, the eastern half of New Mexico and the western fourth of Oklahoma, and then everything north of I-10 going up toward Amarillo. So pretty diverse area. A lot of different type of soil types, a lot of different types of terrain, and from flat on the plains area all the way down into the Concho Valley in that area where it gets rougher and stuff, and then back up toward Bowie where we have more rainfall and more issues. The main thing I think that I've seen since, we've had Invora research work being done for about 15, 16 years, and being able to examine those plots and see what the results were that were outstanding, we're now being able to see those same results on the ranches that we sprayed. And being in year 4, we've had excellent results in controlling large mesquite and small mesquite. My area is primarily mesquite for the most part. We have a little bit of areas where we have some cat claw, and we have some tar bush and a lot of other species when you get further west. But mesquite is a primarily brush that we're after. And the results that we've had have been very good from a control standpoint, and not just suppressing it, which is what we've kind of seen in the past. Occasionally we'd have a kill from other products that look good, and then 4 or 5 years later on other ranches we'd see it start coming back from the base. We're not seeing that with Invora in year 4, which is very promising, and we're seeing a tremendous grass response where we've sprayed on these ranches with just a little bit of help from Mother Nature. We're seeing that huge grass response for about 2 years. So the outcome for this product since we launched it has been widespread. We've covered a lot of different kinds of ranches and done an outstanding job over that entire area that I'm talking about. So I'm pleased to be able to say that we have performed at the level that we said we would when we came out with this product in 21.
Well, that's good to hear. You guys cover some pretty big geographies, and the variability across that much of Texas can be pretty extensive. Let's kind of drill down into the specific ranch level, I guess, and bring Darren and Leland both into this conversation. So Darren, let's kick it to you first. what have we left out, and can you tell us more about your specific problem, what you see, what the battle has been over the years, what you've done and that kind of thing?
On the ranch, we predominantly got mostly weesatch and mesquite, more weesatch mesquite. And from what we've seen, we've sprayed other chemicals on there, other herbicides on there. But if the areas that we've sprayed the Invora on, it's you spray it one time and you're done. We're in about year 4, 5 on some of it, and growing lots of grass, and the brush is pretty much all dead.
So as we back up, what other control practices had you tried? Has mechanical been something that you've tried in the past, or?
Mechanical is something that we've tried in the past, but what we've seen there, we did a couple of 1,000 acres of brush pulling, and you drive out there now and it's the same thing as what we started with before the mechanical pulling. Whereas the Invora spraying is, I mean, I take you to some places and I tell people that you spray it one time and you're done. Where they're spraying other chemicals on there and you're spraying it for 2 or 3 years, trying to do what you do with the one-time spray.
Right. So both mechanical and chemical measures that you used in the past, how long before you would have to get back on those lands that you were either treating or grubbing?
I'd say 3 years. I'm thinking of one spot. We pulled it. The brush that we pulled is right back the way it was.
About 3 years.
Yes, sir.
You know, that brings up an interesting story because before we brought Invora to the market, I remember visiting with a couple of guys down in your part of the world, and you know, they told me at that time I wasn't real familiar with weesatch, and you know, they told me it's a case every 3 to 4 years when you go to spraying or treating, you're back in on that land every 3 to 4 years.
Yes, sir.
And I just couldn't wrap my mind around that. How it could come back that fast, and that is an impressive species. And not trying to make light of the situation by no means. It's remarkable how fast it can grow back and be back in your face in no time flat. So
yeah, the mechanical is a fast deal. It looks real good, but you go year 2 and 3, you start getting that brush back in there to where you're going to have to go in there and retreat it again, and the cost is about the same.
yeah, so that's hard to believe, but eyewitness account there. I appreciate that. Leland, what about you? What's your story?
Well, we battle mesquite and cedar, mainly mesquite. I haven't grubbed. I've been grubbing for the last 25 years just because of the applications of the chemicals that people have been using around us and the neighbors and everything else just haven't been working. So we just use mechanical. We stuck for that for the last years until the last, 3 or 4 years ago when Ross started is when I decided to try it.
You've been using Invora for about 3 years now?
Yes, sir.
So can you tell me what you're seeing out of some of those, some of the first applications? So those 3-year-old treatments.
Well, the grass response, the first, like Billy said, the grass response was really well for the first 2 years, and took care of the weed control too. If Mother Nature would get some rain, it looks really well. And but for the long-term stuff, I mean, we have some stuff that's been sprayed with some competitor stuff, and then a board just on the other side of the highway, and it's night and day what it looks like.
So what made you give Invora a try? Where'd you hear about it and what made you give it a try?
I've been grubbing. I got 2 excavators and a loader and I can't keep up. So Ross was telling me about the chemical and the warranty and all that stuff. And so I said, well, this will give me a good chance to try to catch up. And so far, so good.
Well, that's good to hear. So Ross, did you reach out to Leland and tell us a little bit about your business and how y'all got acquainted and how you got into spraying?
All right. Well, I've been working in the ag industry for the last 20 years, I guess. Working with a lot of ranchers all across big part of Texas, mostly in West Texas. Anyway, when I got into the flying business, I had a natural clientele built up from the rest of my ag contacts, and it was a very natural progression of my customer base that fortunately they trusted me and kind of followed me over into the flying business. And one of the things that I appreciated the most about the flying business is the technologies and what's new and what's on the front end of the industry. And Invora kind of my breakout into the aerial application business, and then the timing of Invora coming on to the market, it all kind of played in real favorable to the big picture, because there were so many operators that have the same story Leland has about, they've been grubbing for the last 20 years. That was a big thing. There was some government contracts, some watershed contracts, so forth, that got a lot of people into the mechanical removal business. Lots of ranches bought excavators and dozers and rakes, but your guys that had your larger ranches, just like Leland said, you can't keep up. You can't ever get ahead. The regrowth, by the time you get what you think is making some headway, you look back and stuff that you grubbed 5 years ago is you've got a lot of regrowth in. And so anyway, Invora was very interesting to me. I got, it's obviously lots of information, building relationships with Billy. He's out. We're looking at stuff, looking at some of y'all's research work, talking about how good the product is, and fortunately have some customers that weren't afraid to step out there and kind of be the first guys to adopt it and try it. And mostly those guys being like the guys that have been losing the battle mechanically, and that kind of have the same history with some of the competitive mesquite products. It kind of became a known quantity in a lot of ways that it worked for a little while. It worked pretty good. Sometimes you may really knock it out of the park, but a lot of times you may, just get a few years of control, and you start getting some pretty serious regrowth. And so a lot of people had kind of, just like Leland said, well, man, we hadn't sprayed anything in 20 or 30 years because there's just hadn't been a real good option. So anyway, just staying up with the new stuff coming on the market, getting it out there in front of the customers, presenting it to them, having Billy talk to customers, explain InView's side of the product and their warranty program and so forth. And the confidence that InView had in the product with their guarantee inspires some confidence in the customer that, says, man, if they're going to stand behind the product this long, it's worth taking a shot, So we had a lot of guys, early on, just had 1 or 2 customers the first year that we put Invora out, but the results were really good. The second year we put out way more. And then it's just been a steady progression since then. Just like Leland, you look at the pasture you did a year or 2 ago with, a different product. Look across the fence at the Invora, you can tell. And fortunately, that's holding true as the years go by. So it product's been selling itself with its performance.
That's kind of the history that I have, I guess. As I was involved kind of early on in the research aspect of what would become Invora, I guess, one day. I remember seeing a lot of what you're describing and what others have described is, early on, you do get that brownout effect. You get that weed control effect. You get the grass release effect, which is what a lot of products will do. It's that long-term look that we're trying to hone in on now, and I think we're starting to see the first glimpse of it. But as far as this story goes, Billy, do you see kind of this trend happening across a wider geographical area, I guess? More people adopting because what they're seeing by their neighbors and getting excited around that.
Well, I think the product is in itself. I've been in the agricultural business, ag chem business for 38 years, and I can call basically 3 or 4 products in that history that were game changers or changed the course of the landscape. And I would consider at this point Invora being one of those products that it's a game changer because of the length of control that we're getting and the response that we're getting on the ranches as far as the grass. And as a term that you've used, it's not a silver bullet, but it's an excellent reset button to push to give you the opportunity to turn things around on your ranch and tie that in with good management to where you can get the grass response and then able to run more pounds of cattle per acre and get that ROI that we're all looking for. That's different than what it is on a heavy brush ranch. And so it's like a big opening for us to be able to do that. And the ranchers see that. And so it's starting to spread. The guys are seeing it, their neighbors are seeing it, they're hearing about it from different areas. And so, we've concentrated in a few areas the first 2 years. We've spread that out the last 3 or 4 to where we've seen that. The other side of this equation that I have to express is I have game biologists on large ranches that are very much involved in wildlife management and hunting and the income that comes from that. And we are not a product that wipes out every species of brush on the ranch. We are leaving a lot of desirable brush that is advantageous for deer, such as we'll leave the hackberry, the lote for the quail. We'll have forbs coming back into the pastures that we sprayed in year 2. And the wildlife biologists are telling me they're seeing an increase in the quail population, an increase in the deer population in the areas where we have sprayed above where it's solid brush. So those biologists are seeing the advantages of Invora and how that it is more selective. We are very tolerant on pecan trees. We're very tolerant on oak trees. And so those are desirable species on a lot of ranches. So we have a product that is not a completely fry everything down to the ground. We are leaving a lot of advantageous plant species on that ranch to help them improve that. But this product is started to take a life of its own from the standpoint of how it's performing. It's to the point where people see that on their own ranch, and it proves what we're saying.
Thank you, Billy. So Rob, as we move kind of to your territory, what are some other benefits, I guess, that we're seeing out of Invora, and what are people talking about there?
So, it's interesting. I was a competitive rep for a number of years, and I'd seen Invora for a long time. Was a little nervous about it initially because it did look good. But what really stood out to me, especially now in the last few years, and I think what's caught folks' attention, is that the consistency of the product. I mean, you ask any one of these guys that have sprayed some stuff, and I guarantee you they've had another treatment of some other product that they put out before that probably worked pretty good. The difference is does it look good every time you put it out? And that's been a big difference, I think, with Invora. And I know when Darren and I first met, we were at a field day on some stuff that had only been put out, 18 months or so before, and it looked good. And we talked some, and he showed me some of the areas where they had sprayed some stuff, and they had some things that looked good, but then he'd take me right to one that was done the very next year with the same mix of products, and it just didn't look as good. So, his initial reaction to it was, well, what we've had works sometimes it doesn't. We'll give this a try because we really have nothing left to lose. And the fact that, and we'll get into the guarantee thing here in a minute, that really gives those guys a lot of confidence to try something because they do have a guarantee behind them. But I think in a lot of these guys, when you start seeing them, they put the stuff out, Darren, for example, year one looked good. That stuff, here we are 4 years later, and it still looks good. It did what it was supposed to do. But the stuff they put out in the second year looked good also. And these haven't all just been exceptional years. I mean, obviously we want brush in good condition. We want good environmental conditions when we put that out. We want to make sure that the product gets put out right by quality applicators like Ross. All these things work hand in hand to make sure the products work. But we've had stuff that has gone out when we've had great years, like this year, where we've had a lot of moisture. We've had stuff that's gone out following years like we had in 22 and 23 that were exceptionally hot and droughty. And, when we found a window where the plants looked good enough and we were able to get those things out, they look good as well. So I think that's one of the things that's really set this apart, and guys are seeing this as they're driving down the road and seeing, different years of applications that there's consistency year over year. Now the guarantee, that just gives guys a lot of confidence in being able to try something, maybe without having even seen, year over year results. That's something that's the first time I've seen in the industry. And I've, like Billy, I hadn't been here quite as long as he has, but I've been in the industry a number of years too, as evidenced by the number of gray hairs in my beard. But that was a new thing for us. I'd never heard of anybody standing behind a product, for up to 5 years. Typically in industry, a couple of years, we'd go back and look at stuff. It either looked good or it didn't look good, and then that was it. And we talked about mortality year in and year out. That's all anybody talked about. Talking about canopy cover and things that different ways of measuring, kind of move the goalpost a little bit. But I think it's something really for ranchers to consider, because that's what really matters in your operation. I mean, we're all trying to get rid of brush to help line of sight so that we can see cattle. We're getting rid of brush to help be able to gather those cattle. We're ultimately trying to get rid of that brush so that we can grow more grass and take, better utilize the rainfall and the forages that we have out there. That guarantee being there is a nice reassurance to know that, hey, this stuff's going to work. And, I've got something behind it that's going to take care of me if it doesn't.
Rob, real quick, since you introduced it there, and that is part of the discussion today, is the whole guarantee aspect and the RangeView platform and all that. Can you quickly kind of cover that? Let's take off on that note for a minute.
Yeah. So the way the guarantee is written is, in mesquite control, we guarantee a less than 5% canopy cover 5 years after application. For Weesatch, because it's so pernicious, it's 10% canopy cover for 5 years after the application. For guys to get into that, we have a digital platform called RangeView, that where we keep track of all this stuff. And we ask a rancher to go in and set up an account in RangeView and to map out those acres that they want to spray. Like several of these other platforms are tied to satellites. And so once that mapping is done, ranchers pay a fee. I think it's $3 currently, and that pays for our satellite imagery of the areas that they want to spray. One of the unique things about this, and what kind of makes it a no-brainer for a lot of guys, is if they go back through and apply those same acres that they mapped, after the application's done, they provide us a shapefile from their applicator and an invoice showing that they purchased a product, and that $3 gets refunded back to the rancher. So that cost of the satellite stuff is then the burden of that's then carried by the purchase of the herbicide. So you get the $3 paid up front, you get it back once the application's made, and then you have the security of that 5-year guarantee from the time you're sprayed until 5 years. And honestly, Billy said it a while ago, it's the reset button. And he said also that it's not a silver bullet. You're not going to ever spray that stuff and then walk away from it forever. That's how those things get into those situations. But you can go in and spray that and have the assurance that for 5 years, you're going to keep that canopy cover well below where grass starts getting affected, which is typically in that 25 to 30% canopy cover range. So to keep it in that range, once you get some of those areas reclaimed, it's going to matter, what you're doing as far as grazing management to make sure you've got grass to compete with those other weeds and brush. They're going to try to germinate through that. And at some point you may want to come back and do some weed control or something like that to keep those weeds and keep your grass competing at a level that'll keep that brush out. It's been incredible to see some of those long-term plots where we went back 8 and 10 years after treatment, and there literally was, you were hard pressed to find seedling trees out there. That is something I've never seen in my lifetime until I'd seen this product. And it's really cool to go back to some of these commercial applications now and start seeing some of those same type of results. So it's the proof's in the pudding, and the RangeView guarantee just helps back that up.
So Billy, Rob mentioned, moving to canopy cover as a way of assessing these treatments and applications that are made. Can you quickly kind of cover why did we elect to go to canopy cover and a 5-year guarantee?
Sure. Case, what we've seen is canopy cover is a true measure of how long you're controlling the brush, even after the brush may have died, broken off, or fell. And so that canopy cover is so important for us to be able to measure that other than just mortality at 2 years. Because I can take a lot of different products and make them look like they're dead for 2 years, but it's about the long term. It's about 8, 10, 15 years down the road. What do we have? And so that's very important. The other side of canopy cover that we all utilize every year when we go to spray is, are we at that breakover point at 20 or 25% canopy cover on the brush, which tells us that we have lost a significant amount of our grazing and our grass. And that's when we need to really start focusing on trying to get our brush back under control. I'm not saying you can't go earlier than that, but at that point, you're really at the breaking point where you're losing a lot of your grass. And so that's important, but being able to measure how well you're killing the brush and how long you're keeping it under control is very important for this amount of investment that we're looking at. Because if I can take a $50 investment and I can get, 10 years out of it, that's one thing. But if I can stretch it out to 15, then that's a whole different ballgame. And that's what we're seeing, that we're looking at our data that we could be looking at 15 years of control at less than 5%. And that is a game changer in the brush business with mesquite in my area, big time, because you divide that cost out over 15 years and it's pretty low on a per acre basis, and it's pretty dang low on a cow basis on our stocking rates and what you can do with it. So those are important things that make canopy cover much different and a better evaluation of the brush than just mortality at 2 years.
So Ross, as we discuss RangeView and particularly around this guarantee, and I know early on there was a lot of criticism for us coming to the market with a 5-year guarantee. We believed in the product. We had the long-term test, as we call them, long-term research trials, and we were able to monitor those. So we had a pretty good idea where this was going to go, and that's why we stuck our neck out there with the 5-year guarantee. But how has the RangeView platform and the guarantee, I guess, assisted you with working with customers? Is this something they get excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. Most people are surprised when, if it's their first time learning about the product, they're surprised a little bit that you'll stand behind the product for that long. And like I said a minute ago, it kind of inspires a little confidence in them, when they know that there's a warranty to that extent behind that product. And so it is a good selling point. The other point that helps that is that they can enroll in that RangeView program at a net zero cost at the end of the day. It doesn't cost them any more money per acre at the end of the job to have that guarantee. They just have to go through the steps to get enrolled. And that's one of the things that I do for the customers. They really don't have to. All I have to know is, do they want to enroll the acres in RangeView or not? And that's kind of a pointless question. Who wouldn't? If you're willing to use the product, why wouldn't you enroll in the warranty program? And so we do that in my office. We take care of all the steps, get the acres mapped, and we'll even set up the account for the landowners, get everything mapped and in there, get the money changed hands back and forth, and then obviously when we're done, we upload all our as applied files and so forth, and at the end of the day, money comes back. And it's a pretty simple process. It sounds like there's several steps, but the routine of it's really simple, and it goes pretty quick, and it's a pretty good selling point for your product.
So let's move back to Darren and Leland. When you heard about the guarantee, I guess, how did you find out about the guarantee? Do you take advantage of the guarantee? And is it that important for you? Darren, let's start with you.
Found out about the guarantee, and I was like, how can you go wrong? I mean, you spray it, and if it don't work, they're going to come back in and spray it again. Talking to Rob that one day out there, and then I talked to my boss about it, and he was the same way. He said, let's jump on it. Let's go.
Oh, we may have lost Darren.
Hello. Okay, now I'm back.
There you are.
Yes, sir.
So you was talking to your boss about it, and then?
Oh, he jumped on it too, because what better deal can you get with a 5-year guarantee on spray and brush? Because everything that we sprayed before, you got, like you said, 1 year it looks wonderful, the next year it still looks pretty good, third year, fourth year, fifth year, you're having to respray it again. So why not jump on?
Well, we do our best with the technology that we have, but I tell you what, we'll kick it to Leland. Leland, is that guarantee very important for you, or have you been using it?
No, I utilize it definitely. It's a no-brainer. To know that Invora will stand behind their product is good. I mean, that's a telltale sign that they believe in their product. And that's one reason I started spraying again. If they stand behind their product like that, like nobody else will, we're dang sure really willing to use it.
Another level of the guarantee that InView is offering is that some other competitive products do not, is they're going to cover the application and surfactant, the turnkey cost of retreatment. You're not going to just get some money back on the product that you paid for. They're going to turnkey retreat, and that's big there as well.
Definitely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, but at the end of the day, I think it all comes down to dollars and cents. And one thing that we hear a lot about is return on investment. So I guess Leland and Darren, and we'll start off with Leland here. What's your take home at the end of the day? good choice, bad choice?
It's worth every penny. It just saves lots of time because mechanically, as we've been doing it for the last 25 years, we just can't keep up. And you get a lot more return on your investment a lot sooner and then you get the weed control. And with mechanically, you don't get any weed control unless you come back and spray it for weeds. And so and the grass response is great. So it's definitely worth it.
Darren, how about you?
Same thing. I mean, you mechanical, you still got your problem with your weeds. As far as running your cows per acre or acres per cow or whatever, however you want to say it, we sprayed 800 acres, and I was I must have bad reception or something. I keep cutting in and out.
That's all right. That's all right. I live in one of those holes as well, so I've been lucky today so far.
Yeah, sir.
But hey, I tell you what, real quick, let's jump back to Ross and Ross, I've heard both Rob and Billy both say it that Invora is not a silver bullet. I've said it as well, and I'll stand behind those words. There's still certain things that you have to do. You have to do right, you have to do correctly on time, such as that. What are those critical things in your mind that as the applicator, I need to check these boxes so my customer turns out with the best job that I can deliver?
Right. So there's nobody that wants the job to go well better than me. At the end of the day, this is my livelihood. This is my business. Regardless what product I'm using, what job I'm doing, I want it to work and be positive experience for everybody. So I want to try to do everything I can on the front end to make the product perform. And from the application point of view, especially in the mesquite application, your droplet spectrum is so critical. And maybe people unfamiliar with aerial application, that this never even enters their mind, but the spectrum, the range of sizes of droplets coming out of that airplane is critical. So you need to make sure that your applicator, whoever's applying, is pattern testing their airplanes at least every other year to make sure that they know exactly what size of droplets they're putting out over your brush, because too small of a droplet, obviously it's too drifty. Too large of a droplet won't stick to the leaf, it'll roll off. So droplet spectrum is critical. The timing, be sure that your InView rep or someone qualified is calling the shot that the brush condition is correct, and make sure that the trees are ready. They got to be just right. Weather conditions, there's so many factors when it comes to the ambient conditions, temperature inversions, staying within the temperature range, not applying when it's too hot. There's a lot of factors there, and for me, those are awful expensive decisions to make as the applicator when you sit there watching the time go by and you're not working, whether it be in the morning waiting on the right conditions or shutting down at 10:30 in the morning because it's already too hot. But if you don't make those decisions, the application's not going to be successful, and it's going to appear to be a product problem, where 99% of the time it is not a product problem. It's some other part of the process. If everything is done right, if the trees are in the correct condition, the application was made in the correct conditions, that's how you really give the chemistry the best chance to work.
Case, I want to make a point that I should have made earlier. The most important things that we do as range specialists with InView is walk these ranches and look at these ranches and make the recommendations. And we have 4 people that are range specialists that work alongside Rob and myself. And I feel like the most important thing that we can do for a rancher is have our boot prints and our eyes on that ranch and looking at that brush and calling that shot. And that can change weekly from all kinds of environmental conditions, but it's very important for us to look at that brush and call that shot. And the people that I have with me are very qualified to do that and do it on a regular basis. And without those people, we wouldn't be as effective because we couldn't fine tune our applications to the brush to make it right. And it's so important for the applicators and the ranchers to get it right, because they don't want the money back on the rebate. They want the dead trees. That's what they went after to start with. The warranty is a good program to back us up if we don't. But bottom line is we want dead trees, and that's what we do when we go check it. So just want to make that point.
Well, that's a really good point, Billy, and just so everybody that's listening knows, we do have another rep in the southwestern part of the state, Matthew Barnes. He joined us fairly recently, and like Billy alluded to there's another 5 or 6 guys out there that so you're just seeing a couple of the guys here, but they're walking ranches, checking out the brush, scouting the brush, and that kind of thing. Because of course, if we've got ourselves out there on a 5-year guarantee, we want to make sure that the brush is in the right condition, and they're going to get the best bang for their buck, so to speak. So I know we're getting short on time. Want to save some time for questions, so I'm gonna send it back to Bryn. But before I do, if you have additional questions around Invora, you can go to www.invora.com. There you should be able to locate your closest salesperson there and get in touch with them. And there's a lot of good information there on that website as well. So, Bryn, I'll send it back to you.
Hey, Case and Bryn, I have one thing before we kick off the question session. This kind of kicks it off. I was scrolling through them all ago, and this is for Leland and Darren. I want your perspective on this. The question in there was asking about grazing management and stuff like that. I know the label is very specific, like Ross said, on application instructions. It's also very specific on buffer zones. And then how to manage those cattle after the fact. And Darren, I know you and I talked about this some because you were concerned about some of that in some of your traps and things where you were spraying and how you were going to manage those cattle afterwards. Has the things that have been in the label been that hard for you to manage through as far as managing manure from your cattle or clean outs, those kinds of things?
No, what I do is I leave a couple of traps untreated, to where, like when we're shipping and stuff, I just bring those cattle into the untreated traps for a couple of days, and it hasn't been an issue for me. As long as, I mean, you just got to move your cattle around, and before shipping, just get them in those untreated areas, and then you're good to go.
That's an excellent point there, and that's one thing that we try to tell customers is don't spray fence to fence. Go across the ranch, regardless of the size. Go across the ranch methodically, so that you always have those places to run the cattle and move the cattle to. Good point.
Yeah, so next question, I'll just keep rolling down the list. Is a pesticide licensed applicator required in Texas?
Yes.
Who wants to take that one? Ross, go ahead.
Yes, Invora's restricted use pesticides, so it does require an applicator license to buy it, as well as a little bit of picolinic acid safety course, which is really simple video you got to watch basically. But yes.
Yes, and as you dig into that label, Bryn, and whoever asked that question, if you'll dig into the Invora label, it discusses that picolinic acid chemistry training. It's online training right now. You can take it through the Texas A&M Pesticide Education Safety Program, and it basically gives you a kind of a thumbnail sketch, if you will, of the chemistry how to do these things that Darren was talking about as far as managing the cattle, the manure, the vegetation and everything like that. It really gives you a pretty good introduction to the do's and don'ts of the label. So encourage anybody to take that, not just applicators, but even the land managers.
Great. Okay, next question. How soon after mechanical clearing should you spray? 6 months after grubbing and planting? I have small mesquite and weesach coming in, or maybe cat claw mimosa.
Rob, that would be an excellent question for you, I would think.
So it is a good question. In most cases, we like to have a couple of years worth of growth, particularly for things that have been shredded, to make sure that we have enough leaf on that plant to get adequate herbicide translocated down to the root. Now, if you've gone through and you've done something like completely, like if you mechanically grubbed everything out and you've got simple, you know, not necessarily resprouts, but new growth of seedlings coming up, those are going to be relatively easy to control. You can get back in on those things pretty quick. But for the most case, you know, people are shredding these things down or doing some type of mechanical treatment like chaining or something like that, or roller chopping that we see a lot in South Texas. We really want to get a couple of years worth of growth behind us to make sure those plants have recovered enough to be able to take a herbicide treatment. It doesn't necessarily fall down. You think kick them while they're down, but that's not how the plants work. If they're stressed, they're not gonna take that up like they would normally would.
Well, and the other thing that comes to my mind around that, Rob, is you have to have enough leaf area to take up enough herbicide to kill that root ball down there. And that typically takes a pretty good sizable amount of leaves.
Does this control single seed juniper and stick chala in north central New Mexico?
So we're continuing to work on different species. I noticed in the chat there were a couple of questions about cat claw. There's several different things that people call cat claw, so I'm going to be a little hesitant to jump out there and say yes, it controls cat claw, but we do have quite a bit of data, and actually a 2EE now, so it's a local recommendation, if you will, a 2EE recommendation that allows for the use of Invora to control cat claw acacia in the state of Texas, and I believe surrounding states where we're labeled. We're only labeled, of course, in Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, but so we're continuing to expand that label. We continue to see how the active ingredient, that's the workhorse in Invora, will work with some of these other species like the juniper complex. Not there yet. We haven't exhausted our resources yet, so we're still looking for that. So right now, please don't go out there and spend a lot of effort on using Invora for juniper control, because what I've seen so far, you're not going to be excited about. But there are a few things that we're tweaking and modifying a little bit to get us a little bit better control from a research standpoint.
And what about Russian olive? Does it work on Russian olive?
That is one I have not seen on a broadcast basis. Unfortunately, my mind's slipping right now. I'm not going to speak that I don't truly know, but from an IPT standpoint, I have a pretty good thinking that we do have activity there, but whoever that is could give me a call and I could talk to them one-on-one or send me an email.
Great. So next question, is the RangeView satellite imagery used only to check canopy cover reduction or any other use?
I'm going to throw that one back to Billy there and let him talk a little bit about that, if you would.
The RangeView satellite, we are in the process of using that for this I guess you would say, determining the brush density of a ranch, whether it's at 25 or 50% brush density. The main factor at this point that we're using the satellite imagery for is if there's an issue 5 years from now on the warranty, then we can look and measure that brush density. And if it's more than 5%, then we're in the process of working the warranty. We'll utilize the satellite imagery to help us. It won't be the only determining factor. It'll be there to help us. But as we develop the satellite imagery and as it gets better, we'll be able to offer more things there with that along in the RangeView program, which is expanding each year a little bit more. So from a brush density standpoint, that's what we're looking at or using it for right now, is to determine how much is out there in it. And if it's at 25% or 30 or 10 or whatever, that's how we utilize that satellite imagery.
Great, next question. Are there any restrictions about the cattle grazing in pastures for a length of time after spraying Invora?
Rob?
Yeah, so no, you can actually leave the cattle in the pasture while you're spraying. There's no grazing restrictions. That's a misnomer that's been kind of hung around our neck sometimes that's not true. There is grazing management guidelines after the application's made. So for 2 years afterwards, those cattle, if they can be moved from pasture to pasture, they can be moved from one pasture you have to a lease place across the county or wherever else. What's more important is that you maintain control of those animals and you know where they're at. Once those calves or cows, if they're going to be shipped, like Darren had said, you know, he cleans his out for about 3 days, which is what the label requires. And it's simply around manure management. The composting industry is a lot bigger than what we all knew. I guess we took that for granted, and that's what all that's about. So it doesn't do anything to the cattle, but that product does stay active as it passes through the animals and comes out in urine and feces. And so all those restrictions are around managing that manure and that urine to make sure that it doesn't end up somewhere that it's not supposed to, and cause problems for our neighbors in Houston and these other areas like that. So we all want to be good stewards of the land and of our animals, and that's part of that right there. So no, you don't have to move the cattle when you're going in and spraying an area.
Next question, will a 2 GPA aerial application provide long-term residual control for mesquite and or weesatch? Much experience with drone applications yet?
We do have some trials underway, and then also there have been some larger block applications with drones. Actually using, Rob kind of alluded to the fact of the corner of the state that he covers. You know, he gets into a lot of the smaller acreage areas and things like that. As far as going out there on that 2 GPA limb just yet, you know, our label basically reads that typically we need to be at 4 GPA or higher. Typically 4 is the bottom end for an aerial applicator, or air application rather. We do know, and we've had some test results that show that we may be able to drop that down a bit, but that's one of those critical components that Ross talked about that we need to take a harder look at and make certain exactly where we want the application to go before we get out on that limb right now. In terms of the residual activity of the product, yes, it's, you know, that has to do with it actually being on the land, being there to provide that residual control to say new sprouting plants or those coming from seed. But I guess that's how I would address that question.
And I might mispronounce this, but does the combination control Boss Dark and Greenbrier?
Oh, Bodark.
Oh, yes. See, I knew I was going to mispronounce it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That was spelled kind of strange. But as from a broadcast perspective, I must say I haven't seen enough Bodark being treated. Rob or Billy, if y'all have, speak up here. But from a broadcast application, I haven't seen a whole lot of Bodark being treated. Darren, maybe you have down in the southeast corner, but I don't know of much Bodark down in your part of the world.
No,
But,
we just have Greenbrier down here, and it'll burn it back, but it comes back. I haven't found anything that'll kill it yet.
and that's one that I hope we're still trying to find a solution for Greenbrier. I believe everybody is. But like you say, we have activity there, but to the level that we want to bring something to the market and have our customers pay for it, we're not there yet. But we're still doing work there.
We'll ask one more question and then we'll start wrapping up. Does Invora have any effect on cactus species, especially prickly pear?
We typically see a little bit of activity, nothing that I would basically say is control from a broadcast application. From an IPT application, yes. So if one is doing a UTV mounted spray rig and spot spraying or foliar leaf spraying, if you will, mesquite, other species, and they spray prickly pear, yes, you will have that same activity on prickly pear. From a broadcast perspective, you may ding it up a little bit, cause a color change and that kind of thing, but typically we do not see that control on prickly pear.
Good deal. Well, it looks like we're out of time. If you asked a question and it did not get answered, please feel free to email education@tscra.org and we will make sure to get your questions answered. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank y'all.